Tonight on Great Performances, African-American choreographers put their indelible stamp on the contemporary dance scene as Dance in America presents Free to Dance. Great Performances is brought to you by Ernst & Young, providing a fresh financial perspective on business so you can move ahead quickly and confidently in today's new economy. Ernst & Young, from thought to finish. Major funding for this program was provided by the Ford Foundation, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, expanding our understanding of the world, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Black Programming Consortium, committed to innovative black programming, the Lowester T. Mertz Charitable Trust, the Irene Diamond Fund, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The American Dance Festival and the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts production of Free to Dance.
In 1963, the choreographer Elio Pomare is living in Germany. Like so many African-American artists before him, he left the United States seeking a more hospitable climate for his work. After 2 years of performing throughout the continent, he is becoming more and more alienated from Europe. Back at home, civil rights organizers are preparing for a massive march on Washington, expected to draw 250,000 demonstrators. As the event approaches, Pomare gets a call from a friend, the writer James Baldwin.
Jimmy, he called me several days before the March on Washington. He said, Elio, you are going to be there, and you better come home. That march literally changed the rest of what I would do, what I would say, and where I belonged. Up until today, you know, if any shit is gonna fly, I want it to be here when it happens.
Inspired by the fervor around him, Pomare decides to stay in New York and develop his choreography. There, he is struck by the harsh reality of inner-city life for African Americans and vows to confront it in his dances.
Politically, in America, so much was happening, and it affected what happened on stage. The issue of black identity. I mean, the issue of saying, okay, if I'm black, that means, what does that mean in terms of the kind of art that I create? What does that mean in terms of the kind of dance that I do?
In 1966, Pomare jolts the dance scene with Blues for the Jungle. The work depicts a cast of characters drawn from the black community, previously unseen on the concert stage.
He brings in not only the themes of the new militants, but some of the socially aberrant behaviors that had started to invade our community, like drug addiction. He imparts a new validity to black life in much the same way that Malcolm X does.
I was very conscious of not wanting to appeal to an audience who was there just to see the beauty of the Negro. And what a choreographer should do It's to instigate or to be forecasters of things to come.
The artists coming out of this era began to reflect this larger sense of the social revolution that was going on in America at that point. And therefore, the black artists emerging during that era actually reflected this sense of experimentation.
But not all the experimentation in the dance world is dealing with social issues. In Greenwich Village, young artists in workshops are re-exploring the possibilities of movement.
Simone Forti was presenting a dance to us, and she was singing an Italian aria and at the same time had a garden hose going full force into her face so that the sound and the water were meeting. And I found it so wonderful, but I didn't know why. I had never seen anything like this before.
These explorations capture the imagination of Gus Solomons Jr., a dancer from Boston who is just finishing up his architecture studies at MIT. He comes to New York City for a seminar held by the Dance Avant-Garde.
That seminar moved into the Judson Church and became the Judson Group, which was a bunch of really profoundly experimental people that was just abandoning all the things that we knew and held sacred about modern dance.
It was kind of taking all the hyperbole out of performance. The gorgeous, made-up, ribcage out dancer, the noble dancer. We demolished the noble dancer. We just went back to pedestrian people.
The Judson Group is a loose collective, and while Solomons is not affiliated for long, his dances reflect many of the same ideas. He explores how dance operates in public spaces and sets his choreography in plazas and parks.
Motion. Gain. City motion, space gain.
I made dances that were about dancing. Of course, this had absolutely nothing to do with what black dancers were doing in New York at that time. Because I was this white kid from Boston, you know. I mean, I grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood, and there were hardly any colored folks around me. So I had never learned about black culture or how to be colored. And so that was a big revelation to me when I came to New York. The aesthetic that I developed for myself came from these ideas.
That whole realm of experimentation is very important to the field because it opened doors. It told us that we could dance in sneakers. It told us that we could dance with shears. It told us that we could dance to the spoken word. When I was younger, I didn't quite understand it, but I came to appreciate and respect it.
The audiences responded to my work with puzzlement, usually. The reviewers often said something like, Solomons' work is always witty, always brainy, always well put together, but it's difficult to love.
While choreographers like Solomons and Pomare are bent on confronting audiences, Alvin Ailey has been thrilling crowds since the late 1950s. For many, Ailey's dances are more evocative and accessible. Still, he struggles to maintain consistent bookings. And despite a steady stream of new dances, audiences favor his early works. His ballet Revelations, which first brought him fame back in 1960, begins to haunt him, becoming the benchmark against which all subsequent dances are measured.
And I think he became obsessed with making a piece that went over as big as Revelations. I mean, it's kind of hard to make your biggest hit, your first thing you've done. Then you have to spend the rest of your life trying to live up to it. You know, I mean, it was pretty hard on an emotional and artistic level.
Ailey is always on the lookout for new talent to spark his imagination. When he stops in at a colleague's audition, a tall ballet dancer from Philadelphia catches his eye. She does not get that job, and Ailey spends the next 3 days tracking her down. He invites the 22-year-old Judith Jamison to join his own company in 1965, and she is welcomed by leading dancer James Truitt.
When I walked into the rehearsal, the first person I ran into was Jimmy Truitt. And I walked in and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm here. I'm just so excited I'm here." And Jimmy said, "Relax, girl. Don't even go there, okay? Relax. Go in and work, you know? Oh, Mr. Ailey, you know, it wasn't even about that. Everybody was busy working."
In the late 1960s, the civil rights movement gives rise to a surge of black pride, inspiring Ailey and his colleagues.
The sense of black pride and of a consciousness of Africa as being where we originated from and came from was so palpable. And the afros were getting bigger and bigger, and the beads and all of that stuff. It was amazing, incredible time.
Just move on up toward your destination. Though you may find from time to time complication.
The Black consciousness movement made me angry. I was more than annoyed. I was angry at that and confused. Because suddenly, everything I knew about myself was no longer valid, apparently. And I would see people, fellow dancers, suddenly growing afros and becoming angry and you know, militant. And I thought, I can't do that. That's not who I am.
The black identity has always been contested in America. And so we have the 1960s upon us, and we have artists proclaiming black as beautiful. It sounds like a trite statement now, but in fact it was a real radical, provocative statement in the 1960s.
These influences come together for Ailey in a new solo he creates for Jamison. Returning from yet another tour, they have but 8 days in the studio to compose the dance.
I made Cry in 1971 as a birthday present for my mother, and it was made very quickly. It's a tribute to black women. It has to do with the struggles of black women in an abstract way.
We got to a point where Alvin and I never really spoke about what we were doing. He would do the movement, I'd do the movement. It would kind of be like what he did, then it wouldn't be like. Then he'd say yes or no. Can you do this kind of this way? Very little verbiage going on.
Bird, fly on.
I think if I had known that this was a birthday present for Alvin's mother and that it was dedicated to all black women, especially our mothers, which I didn't see in the program notes. Thank God I didn't know. I wouldn't want to carry all that with me on stage.
The presence of Judith Jamison performing Cry moving her body with such power and authority, with her short afro and her very prominent African features, was very, very important in the world of art. It really provides us with a way to celebrate blackness where it hadn't been celebrated before.
I wake up the next day and all of it hits. All of it. The press, the box office, people calling up, when is she doing again? And I felt like as much as we had gone through over the years of being ignored by the press and having to go to Europe to dance, to get bookings there because we couldn't get enough of them in the United States, it just all broke loose. And the dance will go on as the classic that it is, just as Revelations is a classic. The dance lives because the dancers are doing it, and each generation informs the dance. I think that's so wonderful.
Cry is a triumph, catapulting the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater to the forefront of the modern dance scene. But as the company grows, so does its cost of operation, and financial concerns continue to plague Ailey.
We spend more time fundraising than we do in the studio doing work. We're constantly giving galas and doing anything at all that would help us to meet this sort of the budget to do what we'd like to do every year.
Virtually all modern dance choreographers are struggling to raise money. Some, including Elio Pomare, decide to forego a permanent company and bring together dancers on a concert-by-concert basis. With his pickup troupe, Pomare mounts Las Desenamoradas, based on a play by the Spanish writer Federico Garcia Lorca. It is an extended metaphor for tyranny of all kinds.
Didn't fit into the mold, and he was very, very outspoken. Las Desenamoradas was the kind of piece that a lot of people weren't expecting a black choreographer to do, and that made a lot of people very uncomfortable. And the lack of comfort was really clearly visible and evident when it came to things like his funding. And he said point blank, he said they come to him with questions like, are you still dance's bad boy? With the understanding that if you are, your funding is going to suffer. And his funding did suffer.
I think in some ways the artists have to not worry about what people say. If you know it's alive, you need just the balls to keep on showing it.
While Pomare maintains his independence, other choreographers find a haven with Alvin Ailey, who provides a new outlet for their work.
At the time that he started that company, modern dance choreographers who started companies used those companies for their works and their works only. Martha Graham's company, Martha Graham's works. Merce Cunningham's company, Merce Cunningham's work. Alvin Ailey did something else. It was a time when black choreographers had a hell of a time getting a company off the ground and sustaining it. Alvin simply said, out of incredible kind of generosity, use me.
Ha, boom, ba, ah, ra, ra, ha,
By allowing others to set works upon his company, Ailey reveals the diversity of black choreography to his audience. One of these artists is Ulysses Dove, who had been a dancer in the Ailey troupe. When he branches out into choreography, Dove creates some of his signature works for the company.
in Vespers. You'll hear him using words to get the dancers to move in a certain way.
Now stand still. Wow.
He has a vocabulary of words, of breathing, of saying things to them that will propel them into doing 5 turns at the speed of light and then reversing themselves and jumping up in the air and hooking and then arching back all at the same time and sitting down in those chairs and cutting, slicing space, defining space by slicing it. I always say when you finish watching his work, you need a towel, to wring out, because he's just drawn you right into his work, and it's over. It's finished. That's what a choreographer is supposed to do. Leave you with that, touch you here and here.
One of the most original choreographers to work with Ailey's company is the veteran Tally Beatty, who started dancing with Katherine Dunham in the 1930s. Beatty has been choreographing for 4 decades. But now, with Ailey's help, his work reaches a broader audience.
Tally was still growing. He was willing to learn and to experience and to put the work out there. He was very much into the music of that time. He would go to clubs, watch the young kids dance.
I'd never been in a disco. I didn't like the music at that time. It behooved me to get to the little discos and see what was going on. Well, I fell in love with them. And went for 3 or 4 years, and as a result of that, I had enough research to do Stack Up.
Short shot win, but we're much more better than we were back then. Not that we were above, but yo, we get smart. As long as the return is other feelings for. Featuring DLB, Tito, and Mike, and Peso, and we won't S.T.O.B. Cause he can tell you from the top that our crew won't stop. So let the bells jingle and let the champagne pop.
Stack Up, as you know, was choreographed in the very early 80s. And the exact same thing that's happening then is still happening now. There's the gang in Stack Up. There are the 2 lovers. There's a drug dealer. Tally was very much into what's happening in the black community, in the neighborhood. And he was able to put it on the stage. It wasn't any fairy tale with Tally. You could find these people in everyday life, and that's what he was about.
Tally felt a need to express what he was seeing in the humming and the activity and the energy of the street. You have to use the vernacular because it's a part of you. I mean, that's what the American culture has certainly been about. Alvin said that dance should be given back to people because that's where it came from. That's exactly what he meant. That the movement, real, truthful movement, comes from those people that you see right out there, doing what they're doing. That is the composition of modern dance, and Tally understood that, as did Alvin, does any artist understand. They are allowed to sit on each other's shoulders. They are allowed to live on the tree of life.
As the Ailey Company becomes an institution in the field, a new generation of artists is heading in a different direction. In upstate New York, Bill T. Jones, a student at the State University in Binghamton, sets out to become a dancer. In 1974, the former track star puts together a collective called the American Dance Asylum, with fellow dancers Arnie Zane and Lois Welk. As Jones begins to gain notice, he is often encouraged to study with Ailey, but he is determined to do things his own way.
I used to rebel against the notion that I should go to Alvin Ailey and let him finish me. We were very much enamored of the myth of the avant-garde that said no to all classical modern dance, which we assumed Alvin was.
Jones discovers greater freedom within that avant-garde world,
Amsterdam, Holland.
but still struggles to find his own voice.
My mother asked.
I was oftentimes the only black in groups of whites. When we were saying we're all just artists here, a voice in me was saying, well, wait a minute. That's true to a point, but there are some things that we are not the same about. And I was trying to find a way to talk about it.
I was taking dance classes at that time. I was the only man there. One evening after a particularly grueling class, and I'd had a terrible time getting the combination, a girl came up to me later and said, I thought that all American blacks could dance. I thought it was a gift from God. 1, 2.
The avant-garde did not understand those things in my personality that demanded storytelling, that demanded a kind of direct relationship to an audience, that demanded a greater vulnerability and accessibility on the part of an artist.
It was like stepping back.
Autobiography became a very important part of the dance scene that created a sense of that one must delve into the self and the personal self, and from that, the cultural and the social would emerge.
Jawole Willa Jo Zollar uses dance to explore the collective identity of the black woman. In 1984, after studying with the improvisational choreographer Diane McIntyre, she forms her own all-female company and calls it Urban Bushwomen.
One of the things when I was growing up, when my mother would come to my shows as a little kid, right before we would go out on stage, she'd say, go for what you know. And what I know is my history as an African-American woman, and what I feel connected to are the histories of other African-American people.
Women! Squeezing hard back bodies made for birthing into pirouettes on dangerous dirt roads. Women!
One piece from Zollar's broad-ranging repertoire is Bati Moves, a dance examining the very nature of black women's bodies. It is first performed as a solo before being expanded for the ensemble.
And I had grown up dancing in a community dance school. You know, if you had hips, that was a good thing because you had more to move and you had more that you could express yourself with. Then when I came into the world of modern dance and ballet, and everybody was so neurotic about their bodies, I suddenly became aware of this whole idea of that my body wasn't right. There's even one story of a friend of mine who came into class one day with her Afro puff. She had a nice big Afro puff out. And the teacher said, gee, I don't know which is bigger, your butt or your hair. African tradition is you celebrate yourself through movement. So I wanted to do a piece that would really celebrate African American women's bodies.
The single biggest influence on Bill T. Jones's work is his relationship with Arnie Zane, a visual artist with no dance training. The two enter into an intense personal and professional partnership, which has a profound impact on the dances that Jones creates.
biggest challenge to my development as an artist was, I think, meeting Arnie Zane. Because Arnie Zane, white man, Jewish, Italian, homosexual man, asked me to define or redefine how I understood myself, and as a result, the art I made in the context of a very complex and large world. How could one be a down brother and at the same time have your dearest companion be such a person? Did I dare talk about that aspect of my heart on stage?
In 1983, Jones is one of the participants in a 4-day series of concerts and symposiums hosted by the Brooklyn Academy of Music. Called Dance Black America, it is intended to take stock of the state of the art. Representatives from all corners of the black dance world are there. Amid conceptual discussions about diversity and identity, a young troupe from upstate New York seizes attention with its direct, visceral approach.
And on program A was Alvin Ailey, Dance Theater Harlem, Elio Pomare, and this little company from Rochester, New York, Bucket Dance Theater. It was so exciting for that many people coming from around the country and the world to see my company up there with the big guns. And Alvin Ailey, God bless his heart, said to me afterwards, "Garth Fagan, you took the show. Come here and give me some sugar." And it was so reassuring and such a welcome into the field.
It was a landmark event. It was the who's who in dance of black choreographers, teachers, students, etc. The New Moderns was represented particularly by Bill T. Jones. And in a panel called What is Black Dance?, he made the provocative statement that he was an artist first who just happened to be black.
I always felt that a black dancer was a person. Black dance was dance made by a person who is black, no matter what the choice of the form. It does not necessarily have to deal with the historical, social-political condition of blacks in this culture. It can be anything it wants to be.
Jones's declaration sets off a controversy that rages through the panel discussions. Meanwhile, a diverse group of choreographers is presenting its work on the festival stages. Among them, Blondell Cummings. Taken as a whole, these artists obliterate any narrowly defined notion of what black dance can be.
Blondell's Chicken Soup and what she does with that is just one terrific example for me of a growing acceptance of people who have pushed the envelope, people who do go beyond the expected. They've managed to insist on their right to put on stage the experience that they've had, the way in which they want to express that without allowing anyone to fence them in. Frankly, when you look at them all together and you scan the field, you really can't say that black dance is any one particular thing.
Let's push it one step further.
As their companies grow through the 1980s, Jones, Garth Fagan, and Jawole Zahler rely upon their dancers as a creative resource in realizing their vision.
I've kept my dancers so long because I take care of them, I challenge them, and I nurture them. They're family, real family. Without my dancers, there's no choreography. Choreography stays up here.
Working with the choreographer is like being in the relationship. And Bill demands of his dancers personally and spiritually. He says, I want to know who you are. I want you to talk to me, speak to me, tell me about, what makes you tick. Don't just do what makes me tick.
In urban bushwomen, the boundary between choreographer and dancers is blurred. The group is highly collaborative, and Zahler's dances develop in workshops and evolve over time. Her dance, Shelter, grows out of an encounter with a homeless woman.
Last winter, I was working this tent job on the exclusive Upper East Side of New York City that lasted several months. Every day, on my way to and from work, I walked past a black woman who, in spite of sub-zero ice and snow, was living on the street.
One of the things that struck me about New York was seeing all of the homeless people in the early 80s. Those are people I know, and those are people I'm around, and I'm interested in them, and I'm interested in seeing how I can give voice to that individual through my imagination, through something I create on the stage. How can I find the dimension? How can I find the power in this character, in this person, and express that through my work?
Garth Fagan and his company remain in Rochester, New York. Being outside of New York City provides a calmer and less expensive place to live and create. But Fagan is still inspired by the city, which becomes the theme of a new evening-length work. Taking on the role of an African storyteller, or griot, he choreographs Griot, New York.
At the time, everybody was down on New York. And I just wanted to celebrate the city with all its complexity, with all the complexity that is New York City.
Like Ailey, Fagan's work is both exuberant and accessible, leading to critical and popular success. His music-driven choreography will later reach even wider audiences when he collaborates on the Broadway hit, The Lion King.
Garth has this ability to pull out this marvelous rhythmic quality that gives you the feeling that you're not just listening to music, but you're watching it on stage. The dancer almost loses themselves in the music, and that's something very special.
Griot, New York is a celebration, but it also addresses the plague which is profoundly altering the dance landscape.
The whole AIDS epidemic has been so devastating to our field. In Griot, New York, I had this whole section about AIDS with the dancers moving downstage across the proscenium, helping each other. Every time I look back on the past and I think of all the wonderful people who are not here because of a moment of pleasure, love or lust, whatever, it's so frightening.
Throughout the 1980s, AIDS casts a long shadow across the dance world. Few companies are without at least one casualty. Others are even less fortunate. Among the dance community's losses are Rudolf Nureyev, Louis Falco, Ulysses Dove, and in 1989, Alvin Ailey himself.
I'm not in the at-risk group for AIDS personally, but I have these magnificent dancers who work before me. And I've been in a situation where someone in fear of transferring from positive to AIDS won't stop and sit down, just keeps plowing away at the material that I've given them to work with. And I know he's dancing against death, and he won't sit down.
For Bill T. Jones, the epidemic is an inescapable issue in his life as well as his art. His longtime collaborator and lover, Arnie Zane, contracts the disease, and he dies in 1988. Jones himself is diagnosed as HIV positive. The following year, Damien Aquavella, a vibrant dancer in the company, also falls ill. Aquavella, affectionately dubbed D-Man by Jones, becomes the inspiration for D-Man in the Waters. The dance grows out of a dream in which Jones envisions a vast body of water filled with friends. Some swim peacefully, some have drowned, some are struggling against the current, and others are being saved.
It was made at a time when many, many people that I loved were growing sick and dying. D-Man is not a piece about AIDS. It's about loss and triumphing over loss. It's about life throwing down the gauntlet and you rising to the occasion.
D-Man is a true ensemble piece, calling upon the dancers to support each other, both physically and emotionally.
When you're in a position on stage of that kind of trust, where you have to catch someone or be caught, it's a blind faith. It's a blind faith that when I jump, this person is going to be there for me, and they're going to catch me, and it's going to be fine, and I'm not going to fall. I mean, everybody would love to live that way and just say, you know, have faith in life, and life is beautiful, and if I fall, I will be caught somehow. On stage is the only place that I've found that kind of freedom.
There's a gesture wherein one dancer is over and the other one is holding his back. I call it vomiting on Fifth Avenue. Arnie had been in chemotherapy, and he came out, and on Fifth Avenue, surprise to us both, he just began to retch. Something was redeemed by being able to take that very painful, humiliating moment, sorrowful moment, and inject it into this lyrical, energetic universe.
It is exhilarating, but it's exhausting. Reaching that point of exhaustion is what truly gives you the feeling of survival, because that's what the piece ultimately is about. It's about survival. And it's a piece, and it does end, and you do take your bow, and you go home and you take a shower, and you forget about it. But for that moment, towards the end of the piece, when you're really exhausted, you're fighting to survive. And that's an incredible thing that Bill has been able to access. A true life thing in a make-believe world. It's a really amazing experience.
Since the very beginnings of modern dance, choreographers have incorporated social dancing into their concert work. They cull their material from clubs, city streets, wherever people move. In the Bronx in the late 1970s, DJs lay the groundwork for the creation of a new dance style. They begin queuing up the instrumental break sections of disco songs, repeating them to generate whole new tracks. Dancers fashion their own high-energy moves to this music, and the dance is soon known as break dance.
Break dance made a strong contribution to American dance. Every other dancer in every country said, "Oh shit, look at what those people are doing."
Hip-hop, as this urban phenomenon is soon called, catches fire. As it comes to define pop culture, the new steps infiltrate the vocabulary of modern dance. But while hip-hop dance looks fresh, it is just one more example of how black dance evolves by borrowing from its own traditions.
Hip-hop has always been just an extension of traditional African dance and culture. We dance in a circle, which is the African circle. There's call and response, the MCs yell out, the audience responds, so the people who are sharing, they respond, or the dancers respond to the DJ's beats that he puts out and the music that he puts out. And so I believe that, you know, Africa has always been a part of hip-hop culture.
Choreographers coming onto the scene today, like their predecessors, draw freely from the vernacular. For Ron Brown, the blending of varied dance styles into a cohesive aesthetic places him squarely in the tradition of Katherine Dunham, Tally Beatty, and Alvin Ailey.
When people see the work and they see this urban attitude of this boy from Brooklyn, and they see the West African dance mixed with Western modern dance and capoeira, they go hip-hop. Which is cool, because eventually, hopefully, they get to the conversation of where does the contemporary come from, so that we can connect to the tradition.
He's a reflection of the power and grace and elegance that has developed since the inception of Africans in modern dance on the stage, from the 30s on. He had all the flippancy of, you know, hip-hop and the kind of get out of my way attitude, at the same time that resonates with this African presence, which is this rhythmic insinuation.
Brown frequents gay dance clubs in the early 90s, and the dancing there becomes one more component in his choreography.
Going to the club to dance is a release, which is about letting your soul be free. You leave the world behind in a way, and you get lifted up by the music, by the other folks dancing. And it's that sense that I want to bring to the stage.
In 1998, Brown teams up with the veteran choreographer Donald McHale to work on a new ballet for the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company. McHale brings the experience born of half a century making dances. Together they forge an unusual collaboration which bridges the generations.
I had this concept going into it that it would feel like kind of tag team choreography, and that's pretty much how it has played out.
Bob, don't transfer the weight onto that right foot.
I think the differences are what are beautiful. I mean, the fact, if you're going to be homogenized, there is nothing. I think the fact that we are different is wonderful, and I celebrate our differences.
In Children of the Passage, dancers undergo a journey to self-awareness, discovering the essence of their past. The work is an affirmation of the African American spirit.
It very much has to do with the fact that when we connect with our roots, with our past, we have something rich to draw on, rather than getting involved only with what is passing. We have to have some things that sustain us, and then we can go brightly into the future.
In creating their work, the two choreographers pull from the full repertoire of dance styles, including the rumba.
Watching an idea come into fruition feels a little bit like what I imagine. It feels like to watch, to give birth and watch a child grow up. You have to sit back and watch. You know, you have to let it go. And so it's not until the premiere date and maybe some time after that when you realize, you know, that's that idea. That's that dream we had.
Throughout Children of the Passage, the sweep and artistry of African American choreography can be seen. It's a heritage whose roots lie in the ring shout, one of the first dances slaves created in the New World. It's a tradition transferred to the stage by the likes of Edna Guy, Katherine Dunham, and Alvin Ailey. And this legacy is still defining itself today.
I feel humbled to be a part of the tradition of dance. I can't believe that I'm somehow connected to Alvin Ailey. And though my voice may be new, it has a very strong connection to what has come before me.
I look back on some of the people who, I mean, their work was so powerful, but yet what they had to go up against in order to get their work done, that it's made it so much easier for me. So I look forward to being part of a generation of artists who maybe we open doors through some kind of way of, by saying African American dance can be absolutely anything.
I am making a path for people who come after me, and I was on a path that people made before me. And if I find my own route, then somebody's going to follow after that, and they'll go off. So it's like a tree with a trunk and branches and twigs, and we're all part of this family tree, which we call modern dance.
To find out more, visit pbs.org or America Online keyword PBS.
He got the whole world in his hand. 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 He got the little bitty babies in his hand. He got the little bitty babies in his hand. He
he got the little bitty babies. In his hand, he got the whole world in his hand. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank y'all. Lord have mercy, let me.
Great Performances is brought to you by Ernst & Young, providing a fresh financial perspective on business so you can move ahead quickly and confidently in today's new economy. Ernst & Young, from thought to finish. Major funding for this program was provided by the Ford Foundation, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, expanding our understanding of the world, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Black Programming Consortium, committed to innovative black programming, the Lowester T. Mertz Charitable Trust, the Irene Diamond Fund, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Educators and educational institutions can purchase Free to Dance on home video cassette for $99 per episode or $199 for the entire series plus shipping. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or use the fax number on your screen.
This is PBS.